I felt something was wrong when my husband kissed me on the forehead instead of the mouth. Insignificant, maybe, to anyone else. But not to me. Heath leaned in, he pressed his lips to my forehead like I was his sister. That was the beginning of the end. Heath Callahan. Captain. Golden boy. Admired by ground services, respect from the flight crew by co-pilots, adored by passengers. Captain Charming, they called him, with his tie always slightly loosened and that little dimple in his cheek when he smiled like he'd just thought of something funny. They didn't see what I saw. The meticulous cruelty behind his timing. The way he weaponized silence. The years he'd spent turning my ambition into an inconvenience. I was Rachel Callahan, née Renault, a woman who'd built her life at 37,000 feet and could reverse engineer a Boeing 777 meal service in her sleep. But with him, I'd learned to make myself smaller. Softer. Palatable. At first, I thought it was the job. The schedule of the international flights, long-distance hours, the emotional jet lag. Marriage between two aviators always walked a tightrope. But that wasn't it. The real turbulence started when I said, I think I'm ready for a child. It was a cold night, and we were curled up in the crew hotel, the one with the tiny blue tiles in the shower and the window that never quite shut. I was barefoot, feeling something fluttery in my chest. A shift. A certainty. I was 32. Tired of the constant forward motion. I wanted something still. Something that couldn't be taken away with a cancelled route. Heath had looked up from his iPad and blinked. I don't think now is the time, he said. I'd nodded. Of course. We were both flying long haul. We barely saw each other. The world was a mess. But the next day, I found the prenatal vitamins in his toiletries bag. Not mine. Her name was Celeste. Of course it was. She was 27, a corporate client liaison for the airline, whatever that meant. She wore silk blouses and always found an excuse to flirt with the pilots. I'd seen the way she looked at him in Johannesburg, but I'd told myself I was imagining it. I'd even complimented her boots. What I didn't know then, Celeste was already 4 months pregnant with my husband's child. A child he had claimed we weren't ready for. It gets better. 2 weeks before the anniversary trip to Athens, I came home from a red-eye and found him in the kitchen, humming. Humming. The man hadn't hummed in 5 years. There was flour on his shirt. He said he'd baked. Felt like making that orange cake you love, he said. He hated baking. And he didn't remember it was lemon cake, not orange. I smiled anyway, kissed his cheek, and ate the lie. But I also took the plate into the bathroom and flushed it, crumb by crumb. Then I went into his flight bag and found the receipts. A hotel in Vienna. A pair of tiny leather booties wrapped in tissue paper. A handwritten note in looping script. I can't wait for us to be real. Love, see. Real. What did that make me? And then came Greece. He said it was his parents' anniversary. Asked me to plan the week. Said I had the best taste in the world. I did what he expected, booked the villas, scheduled the dinners, arranged the transport, designed the menus. What I didn't tell him. Every reservation, every payment, every contract, was under my name. And what he didn't know. I'd invited a guest. Not to the villa. Not to the table. To the island. A guest who'd been waiting to tell me something. We landed in Athens 2 days before the party. The air was hot, thick with jasmine. His parents greeted me with their usual warmth, the kind that sounds like praise but smells like surveillance. Rachel, your hair's gotten so long. You've put on a bit of weight, haven't you? I smiled. Thanked them. Made a joke. Heath had his arm around me the entire time. By the second night, things got strange. The hotel concierge seemed nervous around me. One of the drivers pulled me aside and asked, "Madam, are you certain you wish to cancel the Acropolis tour?" I didn't, I replied. He looked confused. Captain Callahan did. He said it was your request. I smiled, tight. Then Captain Callahan is misinformed. That evening, I called in a favor. An old contact in guest services. I'd helped her sister get a flight attendant job years ago. She owed me. I asked her to check the alternate bookings made under our names. She hesitated. Then sent me a file. Room 613. Booked in his name. Check-in, 2 nights ago. Guest, Celeste Moreau. The night before the party, I stood on our villa balcony and watched the sea boil in the moonlight. I was barefoot. Drinking ouzo. Heath was in the shower, humming again. I took out the printed documents from my bag, boarding passes, emails, photos. The booties. A sonogram. The note. And something else. A letter. Written by me. Signed, notarized, and dated. In it, I relinquished any claim to joint finances. I listed every item I had paid for, every receipt. I wrote down the name of my lawyer. I included a single sentence at the end. This is not a goodbye. It's a clearance to ascend. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted him to feel safe. To think he'd won. I kissed him goodnight. Slept beside him like nothing had changed. Even let him touch me, slow, manipulative, false. In the morning, he handed me a dress box. Wear this tonight, he said. It's red. You'll look incredible. I wore navy instead. And when I arrived at the rooftop, I already knew what I'd find. Not an empty chair. But something far worse. Heath always said red was my color. The kind of red you see on runway tarmac lights, warning, proximity, danger. That night, I wore navy. Because I knew what red meant to him now. Red was Celeste's dress. Red was the polish on her nails the night she brushed past me in Mykonos, pretending we hadn't met. Red was the mark I found once, on his collar, weeks ago, when he said he'd been sleeping in the crew lounge. I wore navy. Because I wanted to be mistaken for stillness. The rooftop venue gleamed under string lights, high above the city. Athens sprawled beneath us like a tired goddess, ancient and watching. The Parthenon lit gold in the distance, the hum of cicadas pulsing beneath the soft clatter of crystal. The night was warm, fragrant with basil and tobacco. I arrived late, on purpose. Let them all settle into their comfort. Heath's family had gathered around the main table. His father, Charles, booming as always, like a retired senator, his mother, Judith, draped in pearls too large for the occasion. And her. Celeste. Wearing the dress he gave me 2 summers ago in Capri. The red one. I stood near the entrance a moment, letting them see me. Letting him see me. His smile twitched. Oh good, Ratch made it, he said, like I was a last-minute guest, not his wife. I walked toward the table, kissed his cheek, let my fingers graze his shoulder. For a second, just one, his breath hitched. Darling, I said. You started without me. There's a seat here, Judith said tightly. She wasn't expecting me. Not in this dress. Not with my eyes this steady. Next to Celeste. So his parents know. I took the seat with a smile. Sat straight. Crossed my legs. Reached for the champagne that hadn't been poured for me. Celeste poured it. Her hands were shaking slightly. She smiled with her teeth. We were just talking about your Maldives layover, she said. Oh? I replied, sipping. The one I never went on? A silence slid into the conversation like a blade. Heath chuckled, but it was wrong. Offer them. Well, he said. We made it here, didn't we? That's what counts. I looked out over the railing. The city shimmered. Some things, I said, you don't make it to. You just survive. The dinner was artfully done. Mediterranean fusion. Courses served like silk gloves. Each plate prettier than the last. Everyone smiled. Toasted. Laughed too hard. Pretended the tension between Celeste and me was imagination. I pretended too. Until dessert. That's when I stood. I have a gift, I said. Heath looked up, confused. He hadn't planned for this. It wasn't in the script. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim envelope. Not the one with the legal documents. Not yet. This one was glossy. Thick cardstock. Embossed with the logo of a luxury hotel. I handed it to Celeste. For you. She took it slowly. Opened it. Read. And froze. It's a receipt, I said. For the room you stayed in 2 nights ago. Room 613. The one booked under Heath's name. You really should have cleared the browser history on the in-room tablet. Someone at the table gasped. Celeste's throat moved, but no sound came. I turned to Heath. You really should have given her a fake name. Using ours was unwise. Rachel, he began. No, I said, softly but unmistakably. You don't get to speak. Not here. I turned to Judith. Did you know your son told me we couldn't have children yet? Not time. Not stable. Not ready. She blinked. Said nothing. I looked back at Celeste. And yet here she is. Due in November? Celeste's hand went instinctively to her belly, a reflex she hadn't meant to expose. And that, more than the lies, more than the silence, was the cruelty I couldn't forgive. He hadn't just replaced me. He'd lived the life I was told I couldn't have. The table began to dissolve. Forks set down. Chairs pushed back. The hum of conversation was gone. Replaced by something thick and metallic. Heath stood. Let's go talk, he said, trying to pull authority around him like a captain's jacket. I didn't move. You remember the villa in Crete? I asked him. The one I booked for your family last year? You used my name on the documents. He frowned. What does that have to? It means I can legally revoke access, I said. Which I did. Yesterday. Charles stood now too. Rachel, what the hell is this? Consequences, I said. You raised a man who never thought they'd come. I looked at Heath. And smiled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I thanked the staff. Left a generous tip. Walked out into the velvet night with the sound of stunned silence behind me. The air felt cleaner away from that table. I walked 3 blocks to the hotel where I'd booked a private room for myself. Not the one he thought we shared. Mine had a view of the Acropolis. Mine had fresh peonies by the bed. Mine had a copy of the documents I'd deliver to my lawyer in the morning, everything Heath didn't know I knew. He could have his red-dressed fantasy. His replacement family. His smug charm. I had something better, altitude. There was something obscene about how clean the air felt after the dinner. Athens smelled of sea stone and honeycomb, jasmine creeping through the hotel's balcony doors like a secret. I slept for 3 hours. Woke before the sun. No dreams. Just clarity. I left the navy dress hanging in the closet. Packed slowly. I took nothing sentimental, not the bracelet Heath gave me on our first anniversary, not the perfume he used to trace behind my ear before early flights. My hands didn't even hover. I checked out without a word. Ordered a car to the airport, not to catch a flight, but to think. To feel, perhaps, in a place where I'd always been weightless. Heath hadn't called. Not yet. He would be calculating his options. Running inventory of the witnesses. Wondering what I knew, and more importantly, what I didn't. But he should have known better. Because I hadn't just seen the affair. I had seen the pattern. 3 months before Athens, I found a silk scrunchie under our bed. Pale blue. It wasn't mine. I don't wear silk to sleep, I don't like the way it slips. I asked him, lightly, did someone drop this? He glanced at it. Said it must have been mine from ages ago. Didn't you wear blue on the Rome trip? I hadn't. I'd worn red. But I said nothing. 2 weeks later, a wineglass shattered in the dishwasher. Not one of our regular ones. Thinner. Delicate. Crystal, maybe. It had been slipped into the rack like it belonged. I remembered thinking, how do things show up in your life and go unnoticed until they break? When you live in constant motion, airports, hotel rooms, back of the crew van chats, you begin to recognize displacement. A misplaced boarding pass. A new toothbrush beside the old. The sound of your partner laughing at a message they won't explain. They're never obvious, these betrayals. Heath had always known how to fly just below the radar. That was his true skill. Not seduction. Not even deceit. Precision. He never denied outright. He redirected. Reframed. Treated my questions as curiosities, not accusations. Don't you trust me? He'd said once, smiling. I did, for a long time. Until I stopped. The week before Greece, I made excuses to stay home. Said I had back-to-back flights. In truth, I wanted to observe. I wanted to listen to how he moved through the house when I wasn't supposed to be there. He'd started locking his study, something he hadn't done since the early days of bidding for captain status. I pretended not to notice. One evening, while he was showering, I used a thin nail file to pop the lock. It opened easily. Inside, everything was orderly. That was the strange part. Heath was never neat. But here, his desk was pristine. As if curated for inspection. His drawers revealed nothing damning, until I checked the back of the bottom one. An old boarding pass. Not his. A woman's name. The kind printed when you check in late at the airport and the system doesn't pull your loyalty number. Celesta. That explained the odd purchases. The suddenly missing savings. The wine I found unopened after he'd claimed to host colleagues. The odd way he'd fumbled the word us when talking about the future. He had already built his future. I simply wasn't in it. After that, everything accelerated. I went through our shared files. I'd always let him handle the taxes, he said it was easier that way. But I found duplicates, reports filed separately in his name alone. A property purchase in the Balearic Islands, he claimed it was an investment, months ago, when I'd casually asked about the withdrawal. He'd said, just playing the markets, babe. He was playing a life. Not with me. Beside me. Back in London, after Athens, I went straight to the bank. Had them print everything from the past year. I was calm. Composed. I wore lipstick, the shade he once said made me look too serious. I wanted to look serious. They printed pages and pages. Account transfers. Withdrawals. Card duplications I never authorized. I realized he'd been slowly moving assets out of our joint holdings for over a year. The affair was personal. The money was strategic. He wasn't just betraying me. He was replacing me. The day I met with the solicitor, I brought everything. Printouts. Photos. Boarding passes. A copy of our marriage license, annotated with the dates I now knew he'd been lying. She read in silence. Asked no questions. At the end, she looked at me and said, "Do you want to go quietly? Or do you want to own your exit?" I said, "I want to be impossible to forget." 2 nights later, I took the long way home. Stood outside our house for a full 5 minutes before unlocking the door. I didn't expect him to be there, but he was. In the kitchen. Wearing gym clothes he hadn't sweated in. A smoothie in his hand. He looked surprised to see me. I smiled. Kissed his cheek. Asked, "Busy day?" He said something about meetings. I listened. Pretended. Then I walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and began quietly packing the life I no longer needed. The day I left, I didn't pack everything. Only what mattered. The cashmere sweater I bought in Florence on a delayed layover. My grandmother's watch. The black moleskine with my scribbled notes and flight hours and forgotten passwords. A single pair of heels, scuffed but defiant. My passport. My silence. Not one of those things was a gift from Heath. Not one had been touched by his hands. I left the house while he was in the shower. He always took long showers, steam and opera and that ridiculous eucalyptus body wash. It bought me 12 full minutes. I didn't slam a door. I didn't leave a note. I took the key off my ring and placed it on the entryway table, beside a framed photo of us taken in Dubrovnik. I didn't look at it. I knew how I looked in it, too tan, too trusting, too his. I slipped into the waiting cab and watched the house recede behind me, one clean breath at a time. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew I was done. For the first week, I vanished. Not in a dramatic sense. I still existed. But I stopped responding. No texts. No calls. No explanations. I decided to leave airline. I need a break, and I had the opportunity to do so. I stayed at a rental in Lisbon, one of those short-term flats above a bakery. The kind that smells like burnt sugar and yeast before sunrise. I walked for hours, blending in with the tourists. No makeup. No polish. I wasn't trying to disappear. I was recalibrating. One morning, I woke early, instinct. I still felt jet-lagged, though I hadn't flown in weeks. I made coffee. Sat on the tiny balcony. And opened my notebook. The first time I ever thought about leaving aviation wasn't during the affair. It was a year earlier, somewhere over the Atlantic, mid-shift on a long haul to JFK. I was microwaving a passenger's gluten-free lasagna. My back ached. My eyes felt full of sand. The first officer was asleep. The cabin lights were dim. And I'd felt it, that eerie sense of being invisible. Not invisible like unseen. Invisible like diminished. Efficient, replaceable, agreeable. Another trained smile and a scarf. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook. What would I do if I didn't owe anyone a thing? I hadn't answered it. Until now. Lisbon gave me space. The city was unbothered by me. The people didn't ask questions. I read. Wrote. Slept without dreaming. Listened to myself again. And one morning, over espresso in a tiled cafe, I pulled out my phone and tapped open the photo library I'd ignored since Athens. There it was. That photo Celeste had posted weeks ago, the one where she tagged Heath by accident. She'd deleted it within minutes, but I'd already saved it. A beach photo. Her belly, rounded. His hand resting there like it belonged. Beneath the photo, comments. Dozens. Congratulations. You're glowing. Lucky baby. One of them had tagged a small travel account. A name I didn't recognize. I clicked it. And that's when it started. It wasn't spite. It was instinct. I scrolled through the account. Soft, unfocused photos. Quotes about freedom and rebirth. Someone trying to become someone. She had 382 followers. She hadn't posted in a week. I checked the website linked in her bio. A personal blog. 3 posts. Generic. Aspirational. But there was a booking form, custom travel planning. I recognized the language immediately. I'd written versions of it 100 times in flight memos. Except she was doing it poorly. And I knew I could do it better. Not just better. Right. I made a list. Not of revenge. Of skills. Flight logistics. Route optimization. Boutique hospitality contacts in 5 continents. crew resource coordination, crisis management, and stories. God, did I have stories? From turbulence and proposals to customs breakdowns and last-minute miracles. The kind of travel that no influencer ever talks about. The stuff beneath the Instagram filter. The real muscle of movement. And just like that, I had a name. Not a brand. A name. Not Heath's. Not mine. Just the version of me that had always existed outside his gaze. In London, I returned quietly. I rented a small flat near Battersea. Top floor. Cheap furniture. Skylight. Enough. I cut my hair. Not short, just enough to be mine again. I bought a second-hand desk and set it up facing the window. I opened a fresh page in the notebook. This time, I wrote. Freedom isn't loud. It's a cleared runway. I began sketching the outline of a business. Small. Personal. Intimate. Not a competitor to anything Celeste could dream of. Not a copy of someone else's idea. Just mine. The first time Heath texted, it was cautious. Can we talk? I ignored it. Then came the emails. The calls. Then the guilt. Then the bait. I never meant to hurt you. It was never serious with her. But the best one? You walked out. Don't act like the victim. That's when I laughed. Actually laughed. Out loud, alone in the flat, a full belly laugh that echoed off the ceiling. Because what he couldn't grasp, what truly broke him, was not the affair, or the exposure, or even the silence. It was the fact that I left with nothing but a carry-on bag and never looked back. Somewhere between Lisbon and London, I stopped feeling like I was escaping. I was returning. To myself. To the version of Rachel that had existed before the compromises and not yets. Before I made myself smaller to match the man beside me. Heath had underestimated me. But more importantly, he'd misunderstood me. He thought I was staying quiet because I was soft. In reality, I was waiting to strike with clean hands. The day I met my solicitor again, I wore white. A simple linen blouse, pressed flat. Hair up. No jewelry, no heels. I wanted to look like every woman who's ever been discarded, and made that a mistake worth regretting. On the table between us sat the file folder I'd carried across borders. Receipts. Transfers. Travel bookings under aliases. Maternity boutique charges timed months before he told me we weren't ready. But the most important document was tucked at the back. A joint investment property deed I had co-signed, at his urging, last year. I'd thought it was part of our retirement plan. In truth, it was a backup for his. What he hadn't counted on was my signature still giving me equal claim. The solicitor flipped the final page and looked up. Do you want to force the sale? Exactly, I said. We filed that day. The decree absolute was issued 2 weeks later. No fanfare. No courtroom drama. Just a silent ending to a loud lie. Heath's first real reaction came via email. A curt paragraph. I don't know who you've become. This vindictive version of you. I barely recognize it. I didn't respond. But I reread the sentence a few times, admiring the irony. I hadn't changed. I'd simply stopped accepting less than I deserved. Meanwhile, Celeste's world was no longer lit by soft focus filters. I didn't follow her, but I had eyes. People sent me screenshots. The once luminous post slowed. Then shifted. Instead of ocean views and baby bump joy, she was reposting quotes about resilience and self-worth. Classic damage control. Their child had been born. A girl. Beautiful, I'm sure. But nothing about Heath looked celebratory. In the few tagged photos that surfaced, he looked tired. 10 pounds heavier. Skin drawn tight around the mouth. Not sleeping well. Probably overextended. A contact in the airline world told me he'd taken a leave of absence, burnout, they said. Captain Callahan's losing his edge. I smiled, thanked them, and got back to work. Because while Heath unraveled, I launched. My first video wasn't fancy. Shot on a second-hand camera in a sun-drenched corner of my rented flat. A simple welcome, who I was, where I'd been, and why I wanted to take people somewhere they hadn't been before, not physically, but emotionally. I didn't talk about Heath. I didn't need to. People knew pain when they saw it. They also recognized resilience. And it resonated. The views were modest at first. But the comments? Immediate. Thank you for being honest. Finally, a woman who talks about travel with truth. I needed this today. By month 2, I had sponsorships. By month 4, I had a team. By month 6, I had my first invite to speak at a women's summit in Barcelona. Rachel Callahan wasn't just back. She was becoming. That's also when I met Mark. He wasn't in aviation. He wasn't trying to be impressive. He didn't ask about my past in the first 5 minutes. He asked what I liked for breakfast. He remembered. He sent books instead of flowers. He asked questions and listened like he meant it. He didn't know Heath. Didn't care. When I told him I'd been married to a pilot who left me for someone younger, he said, "I hope she enjoys turbulence." And then he made me laugh until I forgot why I'd been crying. He met me as I was, not as I had been shaped. And that? That felt like oxygen. There's one moment I haven't told you yet. One final tether, snipped. 3 months after the divorce was final, I was boarding a train to Paris to film a collaboration with a slow travel company. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered out of habit. His voice. Rachel. I didn't speak. He cleared his throat. I saw your name online. You've really built something. Still, I said nothing. He tried again. Are you happy? That's when I laughed. Not a bitter laugh. A free one. And then I hung up. No answer. No closure. Because he didn't deserve one. There's a moment on every takeoff, just before the wheels leave the ground, when the body lifts before the mind believes it. You float, weightless for a second, and only then does the earth fall away beneath you. That's what healing felt like. Not a sprint. Not a sunrise. But a steady rise. And one day, I realized I wasn't waiting to land anymore. Mark and I didn't fall into each other. We met, we stayed. We grew. He didn't want to rescue me. He wanted to walk beside me. The first night I cried in front of him, really cried, after a call from a journalist asking for a comment on Heath's scandalous affair, he didn't offer platitudes. He just sat beside me and said, "You don't owe anyone a performance." I think I loved him from that moment on. The travel platform bloomed faster than I expected. Not just views, impact. Women from all over the world wrote in. Flight attendants stuck in bad contracts. Wives who'd been gaslit. Women who'd quietly vanished from their own dreams and were trying to find the road back. I gave them stories. Maps, sometimes. Encouragement. A path to autonomy, even if it was just permission to want more. That became my work. My life. And then, there was a new chapter. The test sat on the bathroom counter, blinking quietly like a runway light in fog. I stared at it for a long time. Not from fear. From awe. It was positive. I was 35. No fancy treatment. No plan. No spreadsheets. Just life, unplanned, unscheduled, unapologetic. I wrapped the test in a soft cloth and placed it in a drawer beside a tiny pair of knitted socks. Not yet a gift. Not yet an announcement. Just a secret between me and the quiet part of myself that had never given up. We married on a warm autumn day, in a garden outside Lisbon. No one wore matching dresses. No table settings with monogrammed menus. No speeches. Just our names, spoken clearly. And the sound of olive trees in the breeze. Not all turbulence ends in disaster. Sometimes, it's just a signal that it's time to climb higher.